Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters for Anfield Index. I probably lied there because it's not a good morning, it's not a good afternoon, it's not a good evening, and it wasn't a good day for Liverpool yesterday as they came down the East Lancs Road to Anfield. And let's be honest, they left with probably more than a share of the spoils. I mean, David, even all this time later, there's not really too much to be positive about, is there, in all honesty, based on yesterday?
No, I think my feelings are kind of easing, in the hours since the game. I think, you come away and your initial thoughts at full time, as I said, really, really, really disappointing. And it is disappointing. I mean, United start the day in 14th place. It's the biggest game for me in the Premier League and at Anfield. And you're thinking, well, it's a really good opportunity to kind of really hurt them and show the gap between these sides. But obviously what you kind of got really was a pretty even game and United playing above themselves and Liverpool probably playing below themselves as well. And you just didn't expect that at all. But then also, I guess, we have kind of got to be, realistic about this as well. I mean, you look at the numbers back from the game and Liverpool comfortably outshoot Man United. They generate far more expected goals. On any other day, they probably win that game 2-1 or 3-1. But also, you've got to balance that with, it never felt like they were completely managing United's threat on the counter. I thought the press always looked late during the game as well. There were kind of defensive issues there. Liverpool's right-hand side defensively was just a big open space for United to run into. So there were quite a few issues there. But, it's one of those where I thought Liverpool were, it doesn't feel coming away from it like Liverpool were the better team, but the fact is they actually were. It just feels like they should have been by far the better team, and that's where the problems come from, because you're up against the side who they absolutely should be beating. So I think we've kind of got to be balanced in how we look at this, and as I say, there were massive issues as much, but also Liverpool probably could have won on another day, and it's just hugely disappointed because it is Manchester United and because of where Manchester United are, and that it was at Anfield as well. So I'm kind of getting more towards a balanced view on it now, a few hours after the game. But yeah, there's no two ways that obviously drawing with that United team at home is very, very disappointing.
Yeah, even all this time later, I'm still struggling. I've got to be honest about it. I just wanted to play you a small clip from Arne Slot on what he said after the game, post-match, just to get your thoughts on this and a bit more.
But of course, we had to do much better in the 2 goals we conceded. But yeah, that's what every manager says. Probably Amorim would tell you that they had to do better in the 2 goals we scored. So yeah, taking control against a team that plays almost every ball into your last line is not as easy as another playing style.
I know he says there about playing the ball into the last line and the playing style, but the one thing I still can't get out of my head, and probably a thing that's still sort of just sticking there in the craw, did you think that, still like me watching it back, I even watched it again this morning, I still saw Liverpool get outfought and outworked by them at times? That was probably what bugged me the most.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, I think it's been taken a little bit as a dig, hasn't it? What Slot has said there about United being direct, but it's absolutely true. It was a fair assessment of the match, I thought, really. And the United were kind of blasting those balls in long if they could, to kind of turn it into a little bit of a physical battle. And in those conditions, then that makes it a little bit more 50-50 at times. And United really thrived on that. But I also totally agree with you in that, when the game does descend into physical battles across the pitch like that, then you have to win them. And I thought too often Liverpool weren't winning them. They were getting, out-muscled or out-thought in little tight areas, or the press was constantly a second later than it should have been. And again, that's all about being able to really put it in and your work rate. And I thought, it was a bare minimum in these games against United. You've got to match them for physicality because they know that's the only chance that they've got. In terms of quality between the two teams, Liverpool streets ahead at the moment. And so they're always going to turn up and try and make it difficult, which is exactly what Liverpool did in their worst moments in the Premier League and got so many results against United off the back of it. So it shouldn't kind of come as a surprise, and yet it seemed to yesterday. And that was probably, the most disappointing element of the game really is the inability to win physical duels or really commit to the press and then being passed around as a result of it. Just made United look so much better than they were. And it's got to be the bare minimum in these games that you turn up and outwork the opposition or at least match them. I really didn't feel like Liverpool did that. So that for me is probably the main negative of the game, really.
The other negative, I don't know if it's the same for you, it just has this feeling, especially at home, we almost give up the first half to almost suss out the opposition. And we've seen it against Fulham, where it probably cost us, we've salvaged a point. We maybe, I wouldn't say got lucky against Brighton, but we gave up that first half. And it felt like it again yesterday. We just don't get going from the off. And did it feel like, for me, that finally sort of counts against you? You can't keep getting away with just giving up that first half.
Well, that's it, exactly. It's just 45 minutes worth of the game where you could be scoring goals, you could be dominating. And one thing it did for United yesterday is that because Liverpool didn't start that well and United kind of burst out the traps and looked really dangerous, then, that allowed United to settle. It allowed them to kind of quieten the crowd down a little bit, get a few passes off where, or Mainu get a little dribble in where he starts thinking, actually, I can cope in this. They're not going to run all over me. So I think that was kind of, that was a big frustration really, is that you can only get away with that for so long. And also you can only, ask Slot to kind of come up with a way of fixing it in the second half so many times. And again, I actually think this is one of the rare ones where Liverpool weren't much better really in the second half. The point at which they upped it was after conceding 1-0. So, I thought United started the second half as well as they'd finished the first. So, it's one of the rare ones where Slot wasn't able to kind of pull a rabbit out of the hat in that regard either. So, if you're constantly asking your manager to do that because you aren't starting games well, then sometimes you're going to come unstuck. And that's absolutely what happened to Liverpool yesterday.
Yeah, there really wasn't a lot to like. And funnily enough, for all the performance and the talk of the team, all the talk is centered around one player, hasn't it? Trent Alexander-Arnold. I do kind of want to talk about it almost on the field and then off the field, sort of put the two together. But on the field, his performance, I mean, it was pretty hopeless yesterday, wasn't it, if we're honest?
Yeah, very, very poor. One of the poorest games he's had for Liverpool, if probably not the poorest, actually, given the stage that it was on. And I really thought he struggled from minute one, really. 0 out of 5 duels won, didn't win a single tackle. I think dribbled past twice. And then, he doesn't kind of mitigate that either by being good going forward. He doesn't complete a single of his 6 crosses, creates one chance. He just wasn't offering anything. And I actually take Slot's point that he spoke about, the fact that United were clearly targeting that side and trying to create confusion with an overload on that side, with the midfielder drifting over. Then you would have Dalot with a really aggressive positioning, and then obviously a winger down that side. And Liverpool never really got to grips with that, which obviously is something the manager might want to think about in terms of how he could have better adjusted that. But equally, numerical superiority happens across the pitch pretty frequently. Yeah. And the key is, how do you deal with it? And Trent was so poor in a way that we don't expect from him. I know I've seen a lot of comments coming out that, this is what he's always like. I don't agree with that.
And I know you'd written about Trent this morning. I mean, we talked about how bad it was on the pitch for him yesterday. And I know, because I did want to ask you about this, because your article that was out this morning about the future, the contracts, has it reached that point for you where, I know it's been silent and we'd said it won't, or Liverpool don't want to let it distract from everything on the pitch. Someone's probably got to speak now, though, haven't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just got to the point where it's just incredibly naive to think that you could kind of get away with this being played out purely behind closed doors, because, as much as that is an admirable kind of aim, it's pushing up against reality now, which is the fact that Real Madrid are putting bids in that are being publicised. They are using the Spanish press to unsettle the player, and constant reports about his future. It's the managers getting grilled by people like me about it in press conferences. So, in a way that, he maybe wouldn't be if nothing had been coming out about Real Madrid. We don't I know he gets one question about Salah and Van Dijk every other week, but because there's not this constant speculation, it's not becoming as big an issue really. Whereas with Trent, it's just huge, and there's just nothing you can do about it. So, the fact is, and my position I kind of lay out in the piece, which is free to read if people want to have a look at that, is that basically, I think there's an element of the fact that, some of the vagaries around the reporting, and I know there are some reporters who are close to Trent's camp who would have an idea of how this is going to play out, but aren't saying anything along those lines. For me, it looks quite clear that he's kind of keeping his options open, which, that's useful in terms of using Real Madrid's interest to leverage Liverpool. And that makes sense. I think we've spoken about that before, to get the best contract you can, and also to just have that option to go there if it does come to that. But I just don't think that status quo can kind of continue, to be honest, because I think, like I say, as soon as your performances drop in that way, then people will start to say, well, hang on, his head's been turned here. He wants to go. Yeah. He doesn't want to be here. And for the first time ever, since this whole sort of saga started, I actually heard that shout on the ground yesterday. People around me, if you don't want to be here, then go. Or, he's not asked. He's already in Madrid. I heard a few shouts close to the press box about that. And that, as I say, I've seen a lot of that on social media. I haven't seen anything like that in the ground up until yesterday. And that is what is going to happen from now on if he's going to play like this. And, whether it is that's distracting him. He was uncharacteristically poor yesterday, and people are going to make the link now. So for me, if he is leaving his options open, which is the sense that I get, then I think it's time to make a decision. And that may be to go to Real Madrid, by the way. And I still think there's a case whereby, certainly from my perspective, you would send him off with best wishes. And I think he's been brilliant for Liverpool. I think he's won everything there is to win. I personally wouldn't hold a massive grudge. I think it's a life experience that if he didn't want to turn that down, I kind of would get it. And I also don't think that getting Liverpool a transfer fee is that important either. I don't really buy into that. So I wouldn't, personally begrudge him that. I know people would disagree, but I think what is bad is keeping your options open and having this uncertainty now. Yeah. I just think it's, if he is keeping his options open and he hasn't made a decision, I think this is the time to make it, to be honest, because you can't have a situation like that where if he misplaces a pass in the ground, the whole place goes up and starts asking whether he actually wants to be there. It's just no good. And it's clearly having an effect on the player because, as I say, I think that's the worst I've ever seen him play for Liverpool. So I think it is having an effect. So for me, he has to make the decision now, and he probably has to go public on what that is. And that wasn't really my stance before, but I just think feeling that potential for it to go really, really toxic yesterday, I think he has to say something about it now.
Yeah, there is a bigger picture, and as much as obviously everyone loved Trent to commit, the title bid and the team comes first ultimately. The one thing I did want to ask you as well, because it did come out in midweek that Trent did make that bid Real made the bid for Trent, and it was kind of just dismissed, rebuffed by Liverpool straight away. They're not making that, though, without some sort of encouragement, surely, or some knowledge from Trent's camp. That's not just bids like that. They don't just pop up from nowhere, do they?
No, but like I say, I maybe don't subscribe to the view that he's desperate to go, because I think he would have just told Liverpool by now. He would, he'd maybe push for that January move, or he'd say, I'm going to go in the summer. So, please, either it's up to you to kind of accept the bid or not. I think he would give them that choice to make. So, but what I do think is, like I say, I think he's kind of at the moment is keeping it open, playing both sides a little bit to give himself a decision to make. And I don't believe he's made that decision yet. But as I say, I feel like that's kind of unsustainable situation, really, and one that could very, very quickly go quite toxic, particularly if his performances dip in the way that we saw yesterday. So for me, if he has to, he has to make a decision at some point. He either signs for Liverpool or he goes to Real Madrid. He has to make that decision. I don't think he can delay that any longer. I think he has to have clarity about what he wants to do. He can't let this drag on until the end of January and then, potentially beyond that, because it's going to cost Liverpool and it's going to create a distraction. And, whether he's leaving or not, he'll want that winner's medal. So, now is the time to kind of do something about it and give clarity to Liverpool and also maybe the supporters about what he wants to do and whether Liverpool, Real Madrid should keep coming back in with those bids or whether he's going to join them in the summer. Whatever that decision is, I think clarity would be much more helpful than just kind of hanging it out there and leaving all the possibilities on the table.
Yeah, I agree with it. Just better for everyone because there is ultimately a title at stake here for us. That's the main thing. And as much as we're talking about almost feels the negatives, two players I did want to ask you about yesterday, especially I thought the captain did a grand job despite the circumstance. I know people will say 2 went in the net, but I thought Virgil played well. Alexis McAllister, I thought, carried on his good form of recent times. He seemed to Grav did some good bits, maybe sort of in the half spaces, but McAllister felt like the one who really shone in midfield.
Yeah, I thought he was absolutely fantastic. Maybe Liverpool's man of the match, McAllister, to be honest. I thought, when Liverpool were kind of struggling in that first half and not enough kind of zip in the challenges, they were late in the press, as I say. I thought that went for several players. I don't think that was true of McAllister. I thought he was involved in duels all across the pitch, battling, so many times. You saw him come out of a 50-50 with the ball, which, again, like I say, not many Liverpool players were doing. So, huge credit to him for that. But he was also, I thought, showed some real quality on the ball as well. And there's been a little bit of a debate, hasn't there, on social media about just how good he is or whatever. Some kind of doing him down as a bit of an all-rounder and a bit of a, just a kind of okay player, a 6 out of 10 kind of player every week and reliable. I think he's so much more than that. And I thought he showed it yesterday in really difficult circumstances because I thought Curtis Jones had a poor game for his standards, definitely. I thought Szoboszlai was a miss there. And I thought Gravenberch was pretty decent, actually, but I thought nobody kind of touched McAllister's level in Liverpool's midfield. He's brilliant on both sides of the ball, and I think that little rest he had has done him the world of good because I think he's been really good since that. So hopefully he can now kind of continue this to the end of the season because he's an absolutely crucial player and one who he really seemed to get that game and the importance of it yesterday. So, wears his heart in his sleeve, but he's intelligent alongside that. So really enjoying watching him play.
Yeah, he has been brilliant. And when you say like the midfielders there yesterday, if anyone was in any doubt, did yesterday show just how important Dominic Szoboszlai into the system? Because it looked like we really missed him at times yesterday.
Yeah, he's had a funny run recently, hasn't he? Because obviously he's rested for that Leicester game, comes on, gets himself a ban, misses the West Ham game where he definitely would have started, and then of course gets ill, so then misses this one. So it's unfortunate, really. And obviously they haven't missed him in those games. The win against Leicester was fairly convincing in the end, and West Ham they were so dominant in that. But I did think when the kind of team sheet came out, this I promise this isn't hindsight, that he might be a miss today because you look at United's midfield profiles, they're quite slow, they can be easily pressed, but he really lacked his energy in that central area because he wasn't there. And I think he would have run all over United yesterday. And it kind of says a lot, doesn't it, that the press wasn't led very well and looked a bit off it. And Szoboszlai is absolutely key to that. And as I said, a second late in the press as well, and a little bit, again, Szoboszlai is always there, he's always sharp. And then the counter-attacking threat that United show, he's always the extra body that gets back and makes sure he can plug any gaps. So I did think he was a massive miss, really, yesterday. And I think it's, just kind of underlines his importance. So hopefully that illness isn't too bad and he can come back soon because, I still think, you can start games without him. I think Curtis Jones will have better games than this. But there are certain games where you kind of look at it and think Dominic Szoboszlai would have been great there. And this was very much one of them. He's a key player and he's been playing very well recently.
Yeah, it is what it is, but it would have been a different game, you feel, if Szoboszlai had been in there. And we have praised the Arne Slot so much recently, and it's quite rightly that we praised him. But yesterday, there's just a few things I wanted to ask you about. Lineup, do you think, and hindsight's great, like you said, do you think he'll regret starting with Diaz in the middle in that false nine role yesterday?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've seen it work so well against back fours this season, and this was another kind of big game where, Diaz is pressing and being able to drag players out of position. You could see why he did it because it worked so well in previous games, but I just thought up against a back three, it totally failed. It just gave license to Maguire to follow him into midfield and crunch him continually, basically, because he he had the cover behind him of two other central defenders. So he didn't have these big gaps for Salah and Gakpo to run into. And I thought Maguire just marshalled Diaz with ease throughout, really. So I think that was a mistake. And then I think he compounded that then really with his substitution that followed that.
Yeah.
For me, the direct swap would have been to take Diaz off and go with Jota, someone who can run in behind, make Maguire look slow, make him look like he doesn't know what's on his shoulder. Instead, he kind of ended up with Núñez up there, who was getting in a physical battle that he will not win, because we know he's not, he's a big lad, but he's not that sort of centre forward, especially against someone as strong as Harry Maguire. And then Jota in that attacking midfield role where, it can work. It worked against Fulham, for example. But like I said, I thought Liverpool just needed threat in behind. That's the weakness of De Ligt, Maguire. They are so bad when they get runners around them. And what you ended up with was Núñez getting dominated aerially, and then Jota being in this kind of deep role where his dribbling's useful. But like I said, I just thought they needed threat in behind in that moment. And I thought Núñez was poor when he came on anyway. So like I said, I thought it was an error in what he started with, and then compounded it really with his substitutions, which are usually he absolutely nails. Really, it's quite unusual that he got that one wrong, but I really felt like he did it. And it was almost like you had Núñez stripped and Jota, and he didn't want to tell one of them to go and sit back down when the game went to 1-1. And I just think he could have kind of dealt with that one better. But what can you say? It does end up going to 2-1, and everything that happens after that isn't probably on the basis of what happened in attack. But I think if he had his time again, he maybe would have done something different in the starting lineup and also with his changes in attack.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, the COP Council there has put a comment, that was in my thinking as well, especially because they were getting joy in the middle of the park. Did this feel like a game when just Endo's pure physicality could have made a big use instead of Núñez coming on, like you said, Jota up top, and Endo's physicality could have changed the game a little bit as well?
Yeah, I do wonder about his kind of refusal to use Wataru Endo, particularly in games like this, as you say, where you're kind of trying to see it out a little bit. And, it's a game where United were still having that counter-attacking threat, and he's so good at snuffing that out, being an extra man in position to kind of just, because Liverpool's kind of two holding midfielders are getting dragged out at times. Why not just throw an extra one in to just give you the numbers there to stop United having that huge overload that they did down their left and down Liverpool's right? Why not look to bring Endo on it? Yeah, I agree with that, and I find his refusal to use him kind of bizarre at times. Really, it did seem like a game for it. So again, I don't want to go over the top on kind of criticizing Slot for his changes, because let's be honest, we've been pretty flawless in that regard so far this season. But maybe an underuse of Endo there, and this would have been the game for him. I probably agree with that, to be honest, because he did try to atone for the kind of midfield imbalance as well late on, didn't he, by bringing Harvey Elliott on to drop in and moving Jota back into the front line. But I think that was in the 86th minute, so it was far too late, really. He could have done something in midfield a little bit earlier, I think, because Liverpool at 1-1 didn't need to go as gung-ho as they did. But once they had, and you go to 2-1, just drag it back a little bit. That's fine. Let's see the game out. But he didn't do that, and a kind of rare error from Slot, I would say.
Yeah, not a good day for most of the players. Probably not the manager's best day at the same time. And I did want to ask you as well, because as we always talk about off the field bit, I know obviously you got the article out on Trent. Is there a slight concern in the wider sense that with these three players, because even this morning the quotes are coming out from Virgil that it's no further along. We saw Mo Salah's interview, didn't we, just before with the contract. Is there a slight concern now, maybe not just Trent, but these contracts and the constant talk could just start to derail things or distract from the ultimate aims this season?
To be honest, I'm not too worried about Van Dijk and Salah, because I just think there will be a resolution there. I think both of them remain kind of positive about the fact that there will. I just think it's kind of as you were on both, really. And I know Salah said some things this week, didn't he, that kind of didn't go down too well. But again, for me, he's not said anything different to what he said before. And clearly there have been steps forward since then. The talks are much more advanced than they were previously. So stuff is moving along. He's just kind of trying to keep that pressure up on Liverpool and work it like that. So I'm not too worried about those two being a distraction, not least because the performance levels have been absolutely fantastic as well and have remained so throughout the season. So yeah, not too concerned about those. The reason I think Trent is different is because there's this spectre of Real Madrid in the background. The bids are coming in. It's the January window and they want him now. And he was so shocking yesterday. So, that's the only one that kind of concerns me. The other two, I'm pretty relaxed about, to be honest.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I think we'd like a resolution on all three. And transfers, this was an interesting one. This almost felt like it came out the blue. There was two Ben Doak offers, weren't there? There was one from Crystal Palace and one from Ipswich, one for 15 million, one for 16 million. I mean, I know we've talked about Ben Doak, and I know you've got sort of maybe questions about whether his long-term future is at Anfield. Are you starting to think that they're not bidding Crystal Palace and Ipswich without some encouragement from somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think I've said before, maybe on this podcast, that I would have predicted that Ben Doak would leave next summer anyway. Maybe it could happen now. Liverpool definitely want a bit more than that. I think closer to kind of 25 million mark if they are to sell him in January. But I think it's a possibility. We'll have to see whether that happens. I think it's hard to predict whether any club will reach that level at this point and decide that it's worthwhile. We'll kind of have to see how that plays out. But I think that what you can guarantee is over the next couple of windows is that Ben Doak will move on. And I think that's a sensible decision. I think he's obviously clearly a talent. He's really starting to show that in the Championship now. He seems to be kicking on. But the question is, if he comes back to Liverpool next summer, where are his minutes coming from? Where is he getting his development? Because on the right-hand side, you hope Mo Salah will still be there with an extended contract. Chiesa, we hope to see the best of him next season. On the left-hand side, Gakpo and Diaz are there. If you lose one, you will replace them with a first-team ready player. Say Diaz were to go or whatever. And obviously in centre-forward role, he doesn't really play there. And you've got Núñez, you've got Jota. Again, if Núñez goes, he will be replaced with someone who is kind of a top-class option. So this just isn't the minutes there to develop him, unlike, say Harvey Elliott, who Liverpool felt they were able to give minutes to. Doak is not at that level where he will guarantee himself playing time. So I think it's just one of those where, like I say, I expect that he will, if he doesn't go in January, which still remains a possibility, long way to go in the window, then I think he will go in the summer. I think that kind of is already sort of, agreed really that's how it's going to play out.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that develops. And as much as we're talking sort of off the field as well, there's the Carabao Cup coming up next. Do you feel that based on yesterday's lineup, it'll be quite easy to predict who is going to start for Liverpool in midweek in this?
Do you know what? I think people might be surprised here. I think he might go full strength or close to it, to be honest. And the reason for that is that the Accrington game is hot on the heels of it. I think it's clear that what he's going to do there is go as strong as he can in the Spurs game, try and get a decent result in that one. And then everybody gets a rest there, because it's all about that balance, isn't it? Of kind of rhythm versus kind of giving people a rest. And, if you name kind of a fully rotated team in the League Cup game, then what do you name against Accrington? The same again. And you really don't need your start of the Accrington game. You should be winning that one comfortably anyway. So I think for me, I think when we've previously spoke about the League Cup, I've said, this has to remain the competition where he changes things massively. And I kind of stand by that. But then I didn't realise how the scheduling would fall. And as I say, I think it should be, as strong as possible for Spurs. Give everybody a rest then, and then everybody's ready for the Nottingham Forest game that comes in midweek. That would make sense for me.
Yeah, interesting. Joseph agrees with you there. The first team should start versus Spurs. And it's actually believable. You almost feel as though possibly, whether it's right or wrong, there may be an element of wanting to atone, shall we say, for what happened yesterday. And the final bit that we always talk about when we talk about wider football, as disappointed as yesterday was, we are still 6 points clear. We still have that game in hand as well. I mean, all the others pretty much through Arsenal and Chelsea, they just didn't look convincing, especially Arsenal, did they?
No, this is it. for me, I'm genuinely getting to the point. I think after the Brighton game, obviously yesterday is really disappointing, but we should not go too far about it, to be honest, because after the Brighton game and Arsenal dropping points, and I watched that game, I was pretty much of the view, and I don't ever clip this up because it might come back to haunt me, but I was pretty much of the view that Liverpool have got the title wrapped up, to be honest. I know that sounds crazy, but I just think when you think about the maths of the whole situation and how Arsenal have performed, how inconsistent Chelsea. I mean, Chelsea are out of it. They're already, 10 points behind Liverpool, and Liverpool have a game in hand. That they are gone. So your big threat for me really is Arsenal. And as I say, 6 points ahead of them with the game in hand. But beyond that, their performances just absolutely tell you where they are going to be this season. They can't really score goals consistently. They haven't performed well this season, and they have no Saka going forward. I mean, I feel like they're less threatening from set pieces, which was massive for them this season. And they are also now without Saka until mid-March. And then even then, he's probably not going to be at his best till mid-April. There's just no way that Arsenal can suddenly turn their form around with that being the case. And they've only picked up 2 points a game so far this season now. So we're talking about them going from top 4 form to kind of peak Jurgen Klopp, peak Pep Guardiola form over the remainder of the season to kind of catch Liverpool, even with Liverpool having a little bit of a wobble. I mean, Liverpool could go 2 points a game now to the end of the season and get 84 points, which for me might actually win it this season. So they could show Arsenal's form that they've shown so far over the remainder of this season and still wrap it up, in my opinion. So I just think, I don't think Liverpool fans should be too worried. At the end of the day, yesterday's game, I didn't think Liverpool were going to be a kind of 95-point team. So you are going to drop points somewhere and you don't get to pick where it is. And unfortunately, sometimes it's going to be against your biggest rivals at home, and that's going to be really disappointing. But I still just think Liverpool are massive favourites in an amazing position. They're the team with the best expected goals for in the division. They're the teams with the best expected goals against. So the best defence and the best attack. I think there's just too much really to be kind of positive about for anyone to be overly worried about Liverpool's position after yesterday's game.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And the final thing I did want to ask you, sort of wider football, the Arsenal or the Brighton penalty, I should say. I mean, Saliba headbutts João Pedro, doesn't he? There seems to be this big drama from Arsenal fans as though it was non-existent. You're not allowed to headbutt someone in the penalty area, are you?
Yeah, apparently this is the new rule where you can't do that. It's an absolute shambles, isn't it? You cannot headbutt someone in the penalty area. It's this new rule they've introduced to kind of do down Arsenal. I think it's absolutely mad to me that it was even a debate, to be honest. I can't believe it. If there'd been a clash of feet and João Pedro had got there first, there just wouldn't have been a debate. So I admit it's unusual. I can't think of a penalty I've seen like that before. But as soon as you see the replay and the force with which Saliba headbutts him, it just wasn't a doubt in my mind that it was a pen. And I think, Arsenal really, they're kind of where their question mark should be coming from is the fact that they were so poor in the game outside of that. Yeah. Even if they thought that they'd been done over on the penalty, to win a league, sometimes you have to overcome bad referee calls or things that don't go in your favour, in the way that, say Liverpool getting a point against Fulham for a red card that in hindsight actually probably wasn't. These things you've got to overcome them. But the fact is Arsenal are nowhere near good enough to do that because they don't create enough chances. They don't score enough. I think they've got the 7th best attack in the league by expected goals, which, and they don't even now have the best defence. That's Liverpool. So, that's their big problem. Not refereeing calls, and especially not refereeing calls that I think and many people absolutely correctly think that was the right call. So, yeah, they've got big problems at the moment, and I think they should focus on that rather than talking about the fact that they're going to go on this big winning run without their clear best player and having not looked anything like a team that can win the title so far. I mean, they've not even won 4 games on the bounce so far in this Premier League season, so that would be a starting point for them, really, if they want to have any chance of catching up with Liverpool.
And the final question, I should ask you this because the questions are flying in the chat thick and fast about this. I suppose if we package January as a whole, because Chiesa's agents come out today and said he's not going anywhere, like ignore these Napoli rumours. Ben Doak, it looks like there's something in it. There is talk about Darwin Núñez. Are you still ultimately probably predicting that it'll be status quo, probably maybe Ben Doak out, but not anyone in at all?
Well, just on maybe Ben Doak could go, and obviously that makes little difference to Liverpool with him being on loan. But just on the Núñez rumours, I thought it was a pretty interesting report, really. I mean, I absolutely know for a fact they would sell him for 50 to 60 million. I mean, that would be an unbelievable return for a player who's largely disappointed. So I think if the bid came in January, I think Liverpool's preference would be to, not have that upheaval at this point in the season. But if a bid that big came in, I'm pretty sure they would consider it. I think they would do the deal, to be honest, because I think you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. So, but I think the likelihood is that Núñez stays till the end of the season, and then they see what they can get for him. And if it's in that region, then absolutely happy days. But I think if a bid like that came in for him, I think they would be all over it. But I don't expect that to be the case. And I think, I'm not massively expecting any January business. But again, like I always say, if a good opportunity comes up, a player is about to be sold to a rival who Liverpool would like, and they would like him in the summer, that's always a possibility. So would not rule anything out on that front in terms of incomings. And like I say, if a massive bid comes in for a player like Núñez who you feel you could replace, then I think Liverpool will be looking at it.
Yeah, it all kind of has the feeling of, could Liverpool get who they want in January? That might define what happens sort of wider football. But I think if anything, even 50 million-ish came in, I think Liverpool would be all over it for Darwin Núñez. So we'll see if anything develops that way. But there we are, ladies and gents. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everyone is feeling a little bit better, a little bit of catharsis, if you want to call it that, on the back of that discussion. Remember, it was bad yesterday. Liverpool are still 6 points clear at the top of the league, and they still have a game in hand over their rivals who are stuttering. It is still in our hands. So all it leaves me to say as ever is, David, for the time, the insight, and for answering all the questions, it is much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gents, that was another Media Matters for Anfield Index.